In this next video, Kimberly explains how understanding the characteristics and behavior of the sexual offender will help you better protect the children in your care.
Because sexual abusers have no visual profile and background checks aren't going to reveal the majority of abusers, we've got to understand abuser characteristics. There are two types of offenders that we're going to address today: the preferential offender and the abduction offender. The preferential offender is the offender who prefers a child as a sexual partner. Almost without exception, preferential offenders will have an age range and gender of child with whom they prefer to have sexual interaction. It's the preferential offender who poses a real danger to child-serving programs. If a preferential offender works or serves in a child-serving program, it is for the purpose of gaining access to children. The abduction offender, as we said before, accounts for less than 5% of the convicted abuser population. Now, just because abduction offenders are a smaller percentage doesn't mean that this offender poses no threat to children. Clearly, it is appropriate to have basic safety measures in place to prevent these types of offenses. While the abduction offense, the snatch and grab, and the Amber Alert kinds of offenses may resonate with us on a completely different emotional level, the most significant danger to children involved in child-serving programs is the preferential offender. So this diagram is useful in understanding the behavior of the preferential abuser. There is a percentage of the population that has a deviant sexual attraction to children. We don't know exactly what that number is. We know that it exists and it's verifiable. When an individual who has a deviant sexual attraction to children begins to utilize faulty thinking to justify and rationalize that deviant sexual attraction, the boundaries are off, and they're looking for access to children within their age and gender of preference. So what do we mean by faulty thinking? Here are some examples of the faulty thinking used by abusers to rationalize their sexual interaction with children. We're not blood related. So this could be foster or adoption or any other context where the offender isn't the natural parent of the child who's being victimized. She asked for it, or she came on to me. This is a very, very common rationalization in male to female offenses where the offender takes the position that a child approached that adult for the sexual interaction or sought out the adult for ongoing physical affection, saying she was so precocious, she was just beyond her years. I was teaching him or her about sex. So this one tends to be a rationalization adopted by an offender who's sexually interacting with older children, generally middle school or high school aged children. This offender rationalizes their actions by telling the victim, you're going to need to know this later in life. So you're going to have a boyfriend, you're going to have a girlfriend, you're going to need to know this stuff. Another is, I'm not hurting him or her, or there was no actual sexual intercourse. Some offenders will stop short of actual sexual intercourse and assume that because of that, the child isn't harmed in any way. As well, it's very common for offenders to make partial admissions about interactions that occur with children. They won't tell the entire story, but they'll admit to some portion of the alleged behavior saying, here's what happened, I'm sure the child misunderstood my intent. So another example is the child never said stop. This is one that parents especially need to be aware of, particularly in a context where we teach our children to be respectful of adults. Some children do not know that it's okay to say no or stop to an adult who's in a position of authority over them. And molesters take advantage of this natural inclination to comply with an adult or authority figure to sexually assault that child. It's very important that we, as parents, teach our kids that they decide with whom they have physical interaction or are physically affectionate. No one chooses this for them. There are two critical principles that we want you to walk away with when you've completed this training, and Greg's going to discuss them in detail in the next session. But here are the principles. Number one, abusers groom children for sexual interaction. It's a process, and Greg's going to walk you through it in depth. It's the process by which a preferential offender gains access to a child, prepares that child for sexual interaction, and then keeps that child silent after the fact. And the second principle, equally important, is this: abusers groom the gatekeepers. And the gatekeepers are you, those of you taking this training right now. Abusers groom the gatekeepers to create a persona as a helpful, responsible, trustworthy person. And this is why when allegations come to light, what you commonly hear from coworkers or people surrounding that circumstance is, "I'm so shocked. He was the nicest guy," or "She was the last person I would have believed this of." Sometimes gatekeepers have been groomed so effectively that you hear, "I don't believe it." And this is another reason why we need good information about the grooming process, which Greg will discuss in the next session.
Now that you've learned more about the characteristics of abusers, it's time to unpack the two principles that Kimberly just mentioned. Grasping these two principles helps us understand how the risk unfolds so that we can identify it and prevent it. And that's what this next session is all about.